Well, thank you, Russell. Okay, so here's the thing. You can address the questions to me, to Russ, to John, or to Rebecca, and we'll get the mic to the questioner, and if you guys sit up here, we'll get the other mic to the answerer, and we'll take it from there. So the first question is from this gentleman.
Hello, Barry.
Hello.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
The blood, was there enough of a, I've got two questions. The first one with the blood, is there enough of a sample left over to do any genetic testing on?
DNA testing was done on the blood in 1995, University of Texas Health Science Center, done by Victor Tryon. He was able to determine that the blood is male, human, normal chromosomes, sorry, Ron Wyatt, and the blood is so degraded that no full profile could ever be obtained. And what people forget about DNA is it's a comparative analysis. You need a full profile compared to another full profile, or there's really not a whole lot of value other than knowing that that's really male human blood. So that is one answer.
Okay, here's the personal question I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
If, by your own mother's admission, that it's authentic, and you say it's authentic,
yeah.
What other than God himself could create that image?
I have no idea. Did y'all hear the question? What other than God himself could create the image? I don't know, because I've often said that if man can't do it, God must have done it. And if God did it, then it certainly can't be a graven image, can it? As so many, no offense, but so many evangelicals tell me that all the time. And I go, but man can't even duplicate the darn thing using photographs of it. We can't even duplicate it. So if you don't think God did it, well, somebody yesterday told me the devil did it. Well, excuse me, but remember what I pointed out about Turin? If the devil did it, and this were a devil's thing, they wouldn't be trying to destroy it. They'd be the ones trying to promote it, not some old Jewish hippie guy. Questions? It's really hard to see from up here. And see, I threw in my little 4 reasons, which I thought at the beginning. Because I wanted, look, I was really... I'm going to share a quick story with you while we're waiting for the next question. When I announced on my website I was coming here, and that Russ also, who's on my board of directors of Stera, our nonprofit, one of the Shroud blogs, the main Shroud blog, attacked us both for coming to such a way out, right-wing, far-out evangelical group. So we got attacked by the pro-Shroud people. And the next day, they published a 17-page attack on me personally by the far-right evangelicals who accused me of being a disciple of the devil for not accepting Jesus. And so, you know, here's what I've learned after being so long involved with such a controversial topic. You know, if you get attacked by both sides, you must be doing something right. So, anyway, question. Yes?
Is the Shroud still in existence? Because I had heard that it was no longer in existence. Something had happened to it.
Well, something happened to it, but it's still in existence. I wasn't going to talk about it. In 2002, they restored the Shroud. They remodeled the Shroud. They removed all the patches from the Shroud. Hold on, let me see if I can go back here for a sec. They removed all the patches. There you go. They removed the backing sheet, the Holland cloth that had been placed on it. And they replaced the Holland cloth with a much brighter, whiter cloth that they sewed onto the back without ever testing that new cloth to determine if it had been treated chemically in any way that could be harmful to the Shroud. The worst kind of thing about that, of course, we don't know. And it's now been, since 2002, so over 10 years that way. The other thing is it had the kind of sad side effect of lowering the apparent contrast of the image. Put a whiter cloth behind it, makes the image less contrasty. So if you look at it, on the top is these are both untouched, unretouched, not manipulated in any way. The top photo is my 1978 photo, pre-restoration. And the bottom one is the post-restoration 2002 photo, and you can see with your own eyes that it's much harder now to see the image on the Shroud. And I'm less worried about the apparent contrast. Lighting could be used that wouldn't be harmful to the cloth, that might make it a little easier to see. I'm really worried about the cloth they sewed onto the back and what long-term damage it could potentially cause. We don't know because no chemistry was done. So, but the Shroud is still alive and well in Turin, and the next public exhibition 2025. Okay? Questions for any of the other folks?
I have a question, I guess, to anyone who can answer. I guess it's two questions. The first question is, has there been any recent efforts to maybe go back and try to date the cloth using more significant, portions? I know that the question.
I guess I could tell them about Fonte. You want me to do it? Okay. Recently, Giulia Fonte, an engineer and shroud researcher in Italy, applied, was it FTIR and several other established techniques for doing spectral analysis as a dating mechanism. He published it in a book, and then it was published in a journaled article, refereed article, which I encouraged him to. I said, look, put it get it into a journal so that scientists can evaluate it and have a sense of, because what he was saying was that two well-established spectral techniques, spectroscopy techniques, could be then used for dating. Well, nobody had ever done that before. So you can't just say, okay, well, this proves something, because we don't know that the technique is viable. But that's the most recent thing. But no radiocarbon dating can be done. And there's another problem. In 2002, when the shroud was taken out for the, in 1988, when the shroud was taken out for the carbon dating process, they noticed some bugs and bug parts inside the reliquary. So they treated the reliquary with a chemical called thymol, kind of like super mothballs or something, Kills everything, no question about it. It's a real good thing. But it also bonds to the cellulose structure of the wood lining of the chest. And ultimately, when the shroud was put back in for another 10 years until 97, there's an equalization process that goes on. Some of the bonds break loose of the cellulose in the wood structure of the box and will bond to the cellulose of the shroud. And it's new carbon. So I've spoken to two physicists now who have said to me that there is a way of determining the amount of thymol contamination, and there are some techniques that could be used to compensate or negate that, so we can get, because right now my fear would be if they did a carbon dating, they might get a younger date than the last time. We don't know the extent of the thymol contamination. So we really don't know whether it would be a big issue or not. We don't know, because nobody's tested that. But I would be concerned about them doing another carbon dating without resolving that issue first. How's that, John?
And my second question was, as far as people attempting to make recreations, to disprove it.
Yeah.
Are those essentially just trying to establish whether say 36-year-old blood can leave imprints like that on
no,
cloth,
I think you have to kind of look behind the scenes a little bit. Like the most recent is a guy named Garlashelli, a professor, an Italian professor. I think in 2010 came out with. He'd written to me, said he was a shroud researcher, needed some shroud photographs. I sent him my highest resolution, high quality, research quality photos. He used that to turn out what looked to me like a cartoon in the end. Had none of the properties of the shroud, just sort of looked like it. It's easy to make something that looks like the shroud, but does it pass the chemical and physical tests that we've submitted the shroud to? So we have real points of comparison. And it's funny because those of us on the STIRP team were attacked by the atheists of this planet because a couple of the guys happened to be Catholic. So they say, oh, well, we can't rely on any of their science because a couple of them are Catholic. Right. So Garlashelli, who publishes his big deal about, see, the shroud's a fake because I could duplicate it, make something look like it. Garlashelli is sponsored and funded by the Italian equivalent of the PsyCop group, the atheist group that has Joe Nickel and Amazing Randy and all those guys here in America. And they said, well, the fact that we're sponsored by atheists has no bearing on our science. Well, folks, you can't have it both ways. You can't fault us because a couple of our team were Christians, and then you be sponsored by an atheist group and say it has no bearing on your results. But, I've just come to the terms with this. There's always going to be this. There's always going to be skeptics. If you're going to get involved with the shroud, as we have, you just have to get used to it. You can't take it personally. You can't be upset about it. It's either that or go do something else, because it's always going to be that way. There's always going to be attacks. But hey, isn't that what they did to Jesus? I mean, that's just sort of the way it is. But that's okay, because the way I see it, those of us who are seeking the truth about this, those of us who have devoted a lifetime of their hard effort to learning more about it and to educating people about it, you know, it's not easy when you're doing God's work. You know, the pay's not so great. Of course, the retirement benefits are wonderful. More questions? Yes.
Hi, Barry. Thanks for being here. I'm glad that you're getting the right message from all of us, and that's love. And we're really glad you're here, and we appreciate you. It's been over a year since I've seen it, but I know you had so much material to cover. But on Watchers 3, I remember during the course of everything you described, and I'm going to paraphrase really badly. I hope you know it.
Sure, go ahead.
You described a situation where there was a point where Shroud was taken, and there was some deliberate, like, fire damage done, and it was and there was a lot of money involved.
Oh, okay. You said a lot of money involved. No, it wasn't fire damage. Oh, okay. That's a side note to the radiocarbon dating. Okay, I'll tell you this much. There was a man named Dr. Michael Tite of the British Museum who was the overseer of the radiocarbon dating project. Michael Tite then dealt with the three labs, Switzerland, Arizona, and Oxford. As soon as the radiocarbon dating results were released and their paper came out proclaiming the Shroud a fake, and I don't know if you remember that photo of the three guys in front of a blackboard with the dates on there and the exclamation point at the end. That's obviously a new form of scientific notation. So yeah, I call that the Three Stooges picture. And they were the ones that said that those of us who still believe the Shroud's authentic should join the Flat Earth Society. So I've been a flat earther for years, apparently. Anyway, as soon as the results came out, Oxford received £1 million sterling. That's about $2.5 million 1988 dollars, over $5 or $6 million by today's. And they received that money, and Dr. Michael Tite quit working at the British Museum and went over to Oxford, and that money funded a new chair for him at Oxford. How does that smell? Yeah. So it doesn't smell very good. I'm not one for conspiracy theories, but you know, that's not a very comforting thought that money. I mean, when I first heard that, I thought, oh, this can't be about money. But yeah, maybe it can. So again, that's what I talked about in LA's program. Yes. Wait. Oh, okay. Well, we'll let David, and when you're done, pass the microphone to the beautiful lady, because she's way prettier than you are, David.
Got the microphone. This message is to the Jacksons, John and Rebecca. I have two separate questions. Rebecca, first to you. Perhaps you can give us some thoughts about the cloth and how it lines up with Jewish burial practices, and any characteristics or features in the man in the shroud that are particularly Jewish in nature. That's the first question. And the second question is to John. John, can you give us some ideas of image formation, collapse theories, just some of your thoughts about that?
Well, what I'm going to do is, while I get my answer together, I'm going
Pass the buck, Rebecca.
Well, that's the first time I've ever had that happen to me. Well, let me just say something first, kind of as a humorous kind of thing. David and we go back a long ways. We think a lot of David, and he does a lot of talking on the Shroud. Well, he told me last Thursday when you were at our Shroud Center, which we have here in Colorado Springs, for a presentation, that there is as I understand, a film clip where, and it's on Russ Briolt's, you probably know what okay. And he says that it was done in 1991, and a much younger David Anisco is asking a much younger John Jackson a question about kind of what you're just talking about now, image formation, but these coins on the eyes. And so we concocted this idea. We're not ready to do it, but we were actually going to have it all staged for everybody. And I was going to say, well, if you didn't believe my answer the first time, why would you believe my answer now? Then we were going to show Russ Burrell's clip that he had. So, well, let's see. In the image formation, this is one area, along with the carbon-14 problem, that my colleagues and I have been looking at for a considerable amount of time. How do you get this image on the shroud? Barry was very good at saying what the image is not, but to me, that's not good enough. Sorry, Barry.
No, that's...
Well, I think you agree. I mean,
No, I agree with that. It's the whole point.
Yeah.
The point of what we did to get the answer, we didn't get the answer.
so the question is, how do you do this? In our stirrup investigation, we've had a tremendous amount of data, and the data was so intercomparative that one of our colleagues mentioned, my co-worker here, Eric Jumper, said, we have so much data now from the stirrup expedition that what we've proven is that the Shroud of Turin doesn't exist. But it does exist, and so the question is, what are we talking about here? And I spent a lot of my time in my younger years looking at different mechanisms, hypothetical mechanisms, to try to produce the characteristics that we see on the shroud. And what you have to do is you have to take a hypothesis that can explain all the image characteristics simultaneously. And that is a very difficult thing to do. I finally reached a point where I thought, well, what can I use hypothetically to explain this image, even if it violates current paradigms, if you will, of science as we understand them, and as I teach when I teach physics at the university. And what it seems to me, and I've proposed this back in 1989, first time, at an international conference on the Shroud in Paris, and I really haven't retreated from it, and my colleagues who I work with, who got another PhD in physics that works with me, we're all basically of the same mind here, but if you're ready for a radical idea, the radical idea is that if you imagine that the body inside the shroud becomes a radiation source, it becomes like light, if you wish. It's the best analogy I could say. And then imagine that the cloth can fall into this radiating volume as this body becomes mechanically transparent. I think you can explain all the characteristics of the Shroud of Turin with that single radical idea. The 3D-ness of the image is explained by the cloth intersecting the body at slightly different times. The high resolution that you see on the image is explained by a one-to-one mapping of the cloth or the image. There's another characteristic that I spent about 2 years just trying to track down, and that is that the image of the body, the points on the body map perpendicular, vertical, to the overlying cloth, even though the cloth is draping. It's not perpendicular to the body, and it's not but the body surface, and it's not perpendicular to the cloth surface. How could that be? How does the image formation mechanism know to do that? Well, my thought was, well, gravity can do that, because gravity aligns vertically everywhere. So if the cloth did what I just said, falls into this radiating volume, that preserves this, or explains this verticality of the image formation. lack of side images. You don't see any side images even between the two heads. This could be explained by the cloth collapsing and then bulging away from the sides of the body. There's considerably more things that we now know about the shroud image looking at it, which we're ultimately going to be putting in our book that we're working on, that I think is pointing to this idea. But I want to say that we're not trying to prove some idea that we have, say, of our readings of Scripture and then trying to impose that upon the shroud. We're doing it the opposite way. We look at the shroud from the observations that were made by Stirrup, primarily, and then trying to work out hypotheses to explain those observations, and then let the results come as they come. And that's what we're thinking. So I guess to answer your concluding remark for your question, David, is that it doesn't take a whole lot of rocket science to start connecting some dots here. That if this is the burial cloth of Jesus, then this cloth would have wrapped the body of Jesus at the time of his passion, death, and resurrection. It would be his resurrection cloth too. And the tantalizing question is, does this image formation, let me back up a minute. Did that event have any physical consequences that the shroud saw in a physical sense? And maybe that body image is that physical consequence. So I guess stay tuned. We're looking at it, but it's a radical idea, but then the resurrection is a radical idea too. So connecting the two.
Yeah.
I'm like Barry. I'll tell you what I think and the reason why I think what I think, but ultimately I toss it back to you to think about it yourself.
Well, the real problem with resurrection is you can't go into a lab and resurrect people to see what kind of images you can make. Resurrection's a test of faith, not a test of science. That's my point of view, at least.
Yeah, except this would be, there's theological dimensions, religious dimensions to the concept of resurrection, but they also, the scriptures are making physical statements. It's saying that there was a body in the cloth and there was no body in the cloth. And the question is, why is that? And if you have, I mean, that's scientific data too that you can bring into the problem. Let me give this now to my.
We only have 5 minutes left because we're going to have to clear for the next speakers. So.
Okay, I'm gonna see.
You can ask me personally.
I put John first. I put John first, but well, speaking, I'm Jewish also, like Barry. In fact, both of our families come from the same part of Europe, from Poland. And I started coming to Christianity when I was a teenager, and I didn't declare myself a Christian until I was 37 years old, in 1980. Oh, better not talk too much. I'm reeling too much. But anyway, there's just so much in Jewish culture, especially, it says in the Bible, Jesus was buried according to Jewish burial customs. Okay.
And
Okay.
And the shroud's consistent with that.
Yeah, totally consistent with Jewish burial customs. Right. There's so much in it, but let me tell you something. Let me lift up not only Barry's website, but Russ's website. Not many people know about Russ's website. Is it still shrouduniversity.com? Let me tell you about that, because Russ has on his site some of the old, he's like the Dick Clark of the Dick Clark of Shroud websites. Rock, Roll, and Remember. He has some of the old web conferences. I'm going back. When's the first one? Elizabethtown? I don't know if you have Elizabethtown.
I have St. Louis. I have Rome.
The Rome one. Yeah.
Rome's on there from '93.
Yeah. Now, I would recommend you go on that website to find out about the Jewish burial customs, because I made my talking debut in the Rome 1993. and I check it out. You know, it's very good. Now, that's the good thing. The bad thing is, now you see what I'm now. But if you go back, I look like out of West Side Story. I look like out of West Side Story, but I have a lot of material on the name of my talk was Hasidim HaKadosh, the Holy Shroud in Hebrew, and that has a lot of my early thought. Then that was 93, and in 2002 I got my MBA, so I thought I got a little smart and then got more into international Jewish international trade in the first century. So that's my field since then. But anyway, I encourage you to look up Russ's site.
And if any of you are educators or teachers or teach Sunday school, Russ's website, Shroud University, has actual curricula that have been designed for young people. So whenever somebody comes to me and says, well, I'm a teacher and I have, these students, I always send them, I recommend Russ. Right, for the conferences, and like I said, he's actually taken the time to design something that would be very workable if you're a teacher, either for Sunday school or public or whatever. And unfortunately, we have another speaker coming in 20 minutes, so we have to vacate the premises. So I'm happy, we're going to go out to the table, give us a couple minutes to get out there. I'm happy to answer your questions. I've got a few of those posters and booklets left, and that'll be it, folks. Thank you.